Hey y'all, Flipper Fred here, and this is awesome. Thanks so much for joining me today. I am going to share with you the world's only Chris Reeve G10 button lock. And if you know Chris Reeve knives, then you will know immediately this is extra special, and I'm about to tell you why. So this is some kind of mutt knife that never existed in the real world. And that makes this thing really extra special. Spoiler alert, this is actually a really good knife. So before we get too far into this, if you would please down below, there's a subscribe and a bell notification. Man, if you would hit that, it certainly would help your boy Fred out a lot. I do appreciate that. So this knife has been available forever on Temu, at least for probably a good year plus that I know of. And I think it's just never been taken down, whereas, from time to time they'll go through and they'll clear out all the Spydercos and all the Pro-Techs and even most of the Benchmades and whatnot. But the one knife that has always existed throughout all that is this exact blue G10 button lock with the Chris Reeve logo on it. Here's the ironic thing. If you look at the pictures that are online, they photoshopped out the button on the button lock, and I'll show you. I'll put some pictures up to overlay on this so you can see. For some reason, they photoshopped the button out of the side of the knife, but then when you see the back of the knife, you'll see clearly that the button lock is still there because the button mechanism, which is right there under my fingertip, can be seen, but they photoshopped out the button. I don't know why they did that. Even the guys over at Chris Reeve Knives are got to be looking at this and saying, what in the holy hell is that thing? We have never made a knife that looks or does anything like that. Certainly, you will recognize this is an Inkosi shape handle. The scales are clearly Inkosi shaped. And that is a Chris Reeve knife logo that they have screen printed on the top of this steel, but there is no other markings of any sort on this blade. And those two things, the Inkosi shape scale down there and the Chris Reeve logo, are the only two things that connect this in any way, shape, or form to Chris Reeve knives. There's nothing else on here that even comes close to anything they've ever built. So let's take a quick peek at the specs. You can see down the left-hand side, I have no idea what the original knife is as far as I can tell, and I'm not a Chris Reeve expert. So if y'all have ever seen like a real Chris Reeve knife that does or looks like this in any way, shape, or form, drop a comment and let me know where I can find this thing. So I have no idea what to compare it to, but I can tell you this one is 7 1/4 inches long. The blade comes in right at 3 1/8 really is what it is. The handle itself is another 4 1/8. The blade thickness is kind of a medium size, not too thick, in my opinion anyhow, not too thin, certainly, by any stretch. It's 1.126. The handle is just under a 1/2 inch wide at 0.48. The blade finish is stone washed. It is a full flat grind. The scales are G10, very nicely done. Textured G10 over polished steel liners. If you look down inside there, you will see that there are no millings or cutouts or any way of attempting to lighten up this knife, although it only comes in at 3.72 ounces, which is actually pretty darn good. You will have noticed already, as my comments, this is a button lock. Button works pretty good. We'll talk about that in a minute. And I paid $18.49 for this knife because I was just so curious as to what it was that I had to try it out. And again, spoiler alert, this turned out to be a great knife. So let's talk about this for a minute. First, let's do some size comps because maybe it's sometimes hard to get your head around what you're really looking at here. So if you are a Spyderco person, you will recognize the PM2 as well as the Para 3. So this is definitely more the Para 3 size of a knife. Very, very similar in overall size, but you can see a lot more blade on this, whatever Chris Reeve mutt we're going to call it. If you are a Benchmade person, you might recognize the full-size Crooked River, which is considerably larger. And of course, everybody probably has a bug out somewhere in their package or in their knife box. So it's obviously very similar, nearly identical. I think this is it comes in at 1/8 of an inch, basically not even a full 1/8 of an inch shorter than the bug out. You can see the blade length is very comparable. So if you were looking at, the closest size comparison that you would put this up against is definitely going to be a bug out sized knife. Okay, so let's talk about this. Chris Reeve never, to my knowledge, has made a button lock, period. I can't find any. If there's any out there, y'all please let me know down in the comments. But to the best of my research ability, Chris Reeves never made a button lock. So there's weird thing number one, why they would put his logo on it. They've also never made an all G10 scales that I know of. G10 over polished steel, to be exact. To the best of my research, Chris Reeve never made a forward finger choil on any of their blades, which is beautiful on this blade. I actually love that. So those are just a few of the things that make this thing really different. If you've noticed, the action on this thing is great. You can see it bounces. It's a matter of timing your button drop. If you get that button right, it does fall shut. You can see it swings freely with the button depressed. It's nice smooth action. You can obviously finger flip it all day long. You can index flip it with that index finger. If you're a Spidey flicker person, you can also, well, I say that, you can also Spidey flick. It's hard to do when you're looking at the camera. Let's try that from the back side. There you go. Much smoother. That's actually how I most usually open the knife, is that Spidey flick from the back. Of course, it is a button lock, so you could just use the button itself to flip it open and closed. If you want to get real wild and crazy, you can pinch that blade and drop it down. I do not recommend that because it's real hard to hold on to this slick stone-washed blade. But the action is great. It's drop shut friendly, very smooth. One of the things that was really concerning me was the button lock. How good is the lockup action on that button? I'll tell you, it's great. I have spine whacked the holy hell out of this knife. It is not breaking out of that button lock. So another good thing. Very strong, no issues, no blade play, forward, backwards, side to side, up, down. That blade is solid in there at lockup. The blade is actually centered in the knife, which is nice on an $18 Chinese knife. It's got the forward finger choil, which I love, so you can definitely choke up, but it also gives you a great sharpening choil. So you can see the plunge grind does come down about halfway into that finger choil. You can see with a little bit of the shade play. However, I mean, you got a lot of sharpenings left on this knife. So those of you who like to sharpen and want to sharpen it up a little bit, you have plenty of sharpening life on this knife as well. It just feels great in the hand. So it's, again, just under ½ inch wide. But those finger choils that were made on the 𝗗𝗜𝗦𝗖𝗟𝗔𝗜𝗠𝗘 were made beautifully. It's got nice jimping on the back of the blade. It's rather large as far as jimping goes, but it definitely works. Your finger doesn't want to slide across that too easily, yet it's not sharp or pointy in any way either. But man, it fits the hand great. I have a size large glove, so you can see you can get a easy four-finger grip back here on the blade. Even if you had extra large hands, you would still be able to get that grip. Again, you've got the forward finger choil. You can easily choke up for doing some light detail work. Pinch grip works great. These two fingers fit right there like that. So if you had to pinch grip and you want to do a little carving of some sort, man, in all positions, this knife just feels good in the hand. The blade is thick enough, but not too thick. Let's again compare it to say a bug out. Much thinner. So let's get a little more focus on that. You see the bug out blade is way thinner than this one. So I originally thought, well, is that too thick? But no, I mean, to me, this is the knife that I want to carry because I don't have to worry about prying. If I need to pry a little bit with this, I mean, it's a cheap Chinese knockoff knife. So I want to be able to work hard with it. But it's still got that full flat grind. It's still pretty slicey. I'll tell you, behind the edge, I measured it out. It came out pretty good. Boy, this is always tricky to do. So got about 22 thousandths on the back. It gets a little wider up here on the front. So nope, there's 20. So I must have measured the back wrong because the front wrong. Yeah, I must have measured this back wrong. Boy, that's so hard to get. So about 19, which is darn slicey. Forget about the size. Let's talk about some actual cutting action. This thing came beautifully sharp right out of the box. For as thick as that blade is, it was sharpened well upon arrival. You can see this thing is ready to cut. Yeehaw for that. We can cut paper. How about a little bit of cardboard here? This thing makes light work of cardboard. I mean, like, it's just right through, just like, hot knife through butter. Love it. Yeehaw for that. So it cuts paper and it cuts cardboard. Let's clean up the mess a little bit. All right, let's bring this thing home. Negatives. So there's one negative that just keeps me from saying this is one of the greatest Chinese knockoff knives ever. It's not this one, but I'll start here. There's an extra hole in the back of this knife. Now, I have no idea what that hole is for. I suspect it might have been for like a lanyard or some type of lanyard attachment. So like on the small Sabenzas here, you have this pin that goes through the back, and that's designed just to hold your lanyard. So I'm wondering if maybe that's what it is and they just forgot it, left it out, but I can see all the pictures online where you can buy them. They all have this empty hole. So I have no idea what that is, but here's the biggest deal killer of all. You may have already noticed it. There's no pocket clip on this knife. Like, oh my God, this was going to be like the best knife ever until there's no pocket clip. What do they do with the pocket clip? Which is why I have a lanyard on this thing. I'm like trying to figure out now, can I like tap my own holes maybe and just add a pocket clip to this thing? Because this knife is good enough. It's comfortable enough. It's thick enough. It's heavy duty enough. It's slicey enough. The action is solid. The lockup is solid. The blade is centered. Why couldn't you have given me just a pocket clip? That's all I wanted was a pocket clip on this thing. So I don't know what to say. I mean, you've kind of gotten my impressions. This is a fantastic knife. It's great textured G10. The button is great. It's solid. I've gone through all those things. I love this knife, and I still carry it. I will drop this thing in my pocket all day long because you can see I'll shake it. That blade does not come out when you even shaking it, you know? You see what I'm doing here? So I'm pretty comfortable with dropping this in my pocket, which is why I also put that lanyard on there. Helps me to kind of grab it by the right end and pull it out of my pocket very gently, albeit. But I will absolutely drop this in my pocket just because it's such a good knife in every other way. And if y'all got any great suggestions on how I can tap in my own like homemade pocket clip on this thing, I sure would appreciate that because, boy, your boy Fred here is loving this cheap artificial mutt kind of not really a Chris Reeves, I don't know what to call it, knife. So there you go. Again, thanks so much for your time today. It means the world to me if down below you could hit that subscribe and bell notification. It really helps us little guys on the YouTubes. I sure do appreciate it. Otherwise, we'll see you soon on the next video. Thanks. Y'all be good.